Okay, folks, here we are. We're doing chapter 4, lesson 1 in our social studies text. Starts on page 104 and ends on page 111. So the first thing that we're going to do is talk about some vocabulary words. The first word is region. Come over here. It says a region is an area defined by common features or conditions. All right. Then we also have climate. Climate is a pattern of weather in a place over a long period of time. So that's something you need to remember, guys. Weather is what happens daily. Weather can change with an hour, but climate changes over time or occurs over time. The next word is dissent, and we've talked a lot about this. It means to disagree. Okay. Then our next word is proprietor. A proprietor is someone who owns land or property. In this case, we're talking about someone who owns a colony. Okay, and now we're talking about diverse, right? And that means different. And that's it for our vocabulary words. Again, I've got my highlighter. I've got a really cool ink pen that my son Alex got me several years ago for Christmas. So I would encourage you to have the same things out. Here are our objectives. We're going to locate and identify 13 colonies. Talk about the founders. We're going to explain ideas about limited government, the rule of law, and individual rights. Provide examples of self-government. Explain how the Spanish, British, and French altered land. Not altered, guys. That means change. Land the 13 colonies. Describe how Native Americans and colonists adapted to their environment. The early colonists in North America were influenced by their environment. Settlers in Jamestown faced swarms of mosquitoes from nearby swamps. The Pilgrims of Plymouth Plantation suffered through freezing winter weather. The Dutch in New Amsterdam used their location to become a center for trade. Geography would continue to shape the life as the colonies grew. So that's really kind of a big, huge idea right here. That geography, the lay of the land, shapes the way we live. Geography of the English colonies. Settlers from England came to North America throughout the 1600s. By the 1730s, colonies stretched from present-day Maine, which is up here, down to Georgia, okay, right there. These colonies can be grouped into 3 regions. A region is area defined by common features or conditions. The colonists lived in the New England, the Mid-Atlantic region, and the South. In New England, people farmed the thin, rocky soil, but farming was not the region's main business. Instead, many local merchants traded goods with other colonies. Others earned their livings cutting timber from dense forests. Along the coast, they built ships, fished, and hunted whales. Right, so that's huge. In New England, guys, farming, it wasn't that great because the soil wasn't very good. But they traded goods with England and other colonies. They cut forests and used those materials and to build houses and ships. And along the coast, they built ships, fished, or hunted whales. So there are 3 things that they did besides farming. 1, 2, 3. All right. The middle colonies had rich soil and a warmer climate. Climate is the pattern of weather in a place over a long period of time. Many colonists in this region raised wheat to sell. Iron dug from the ground was another key resource. Right, guys, they grew so much wheat in the middle colonies, they called those the breadbasket colonies. Because that's where wheat comes from. The flour, they take the wheat, they grind it into flour, they take the flour and bake it into bread. Colonies in the southern region had an even warmer climate. Along the coast, the land was flat and the soil was rich. Farmers in this region planted cash crops such as tobacco and rice. So, guys, that's a huge term right there, cash crop. A cash crop, guys, is a crop that is sold for money. Their large farms are called plantations. In all regions, water was a key means of transportation and trade. Settlements clustered near rivers and on the coast. And while the land shaped how the settlements grew, settlers also changed the land. They cleared trees for farming and harvested timber. They changed the soil by growing crops year after year. And settlers also built roads and bridges. So let's go ahead and fill this out. So, how settlers changed the land. We go back up here. It says that they cleared trees. All right. They grew crops year after year, which is really not a good thing. They didn't really add anything to the soil. So basically, guys, what they're doing, they literally wore out the soil. And they also, we put this in there, they built roads, bridges, etc. Okay. So here's a little interesting George Washington trivia. He was one of the first farmers that kind of like was really into rotating his crops. So he didn't grow the same thing year after year in the same spot. He would also plant cover crops, which meant that he would plant an area, farm it for a while, and then grow another crop on top of it to kind of let the soil rest. Then he would plow that under and then grow another crop. And he was also big into using manure as fertilizer. So, how the land shaped settlements? Well, what do you guys think? If you look at that, I would say that the colonists wanted to be near rivers because they were used for transportation. I know you guys want to go swimming and fishing, but they used it to move goods because there were no roads, guys. Even by 1790, there probably wasn't maybe a one bridge over a major river in the 13 colonies of the United States by that time. And I don't think if you were to look at like 1760, 1765, as far as having roads that were paved, and by that I mean like crushed stone or something like that, in the entire 13 colonies, there probably wasn't 100 miles of paved roads. I would also say they used bays along the ocean were used for harbors. Okay, and the mountains, remember we talked about the Appalachian Mountains over here? They were kind of a barrier. So land barriers could stop settlement. And I hope no one says, boy, I want to write like Mr. Connor when I get older. All right, here we go. The New England colonies. It says, in New England, the Puritans established towns throughout the region. There we go. Get that. Sorry about that, guys. Settlers built homes and farms on land they saw as vacant. However, local Native Americans did not fence or use land in the way the English people did. The land that the colonists assumed was empty was absolutely necessary to Native Americans, and such differences led to conflict. So here's the word conflict. And what caused the conflict? Well, the Native Americans did not fence or use land the way the English people did. And the settlers thought the land was vacant. Okay, so that was the conflict. That was a huge problem for them. In each New England town, the meeting house was the center of town life. It was usually a large, simple building located on the town common area. The meeting house was used for religious services and town meetings. So if you look down here, guys, there's the meeting house. And so we said that was like their church. And it was kind of like their courthouse. Or you could say their assembly hall. When they wanted to get together, that's where they went. Okay. Government decisions and actions were decided at town meetings. Only church-going men who owned property could vote at these meetings. And I think that's huge that you remember that, guys, because if you wanted to take part in the government, you had to have three things. So, government participation. One, you had to belong to the church. Okay? You had to own property. And you had to be male. So there were no women voting on these. Male settlers had a say in government, but Puritan leaders did not put up with dissent or disagreement. Roger Williams discovered this when he came to Massachusetts Bay Colony in 1631. Williams was a church leader, but he believed in freedom of religion. So this is kind of a huge thing here as we look back. And sorry about this, guys, just trying to get so you can see it all, about Roger Williams. Okay. And we're just going to make some notes about him over here. Roger Williams, because he's an important guy. Came in 1631. He believed in religious freedom. All right. Williams argued that civic leaders did not have the right to require everyone to worship in the same way. Okay, that really caused people's problems. And he said you could worship in your own way. Puritans didn't like that. Top Puritan leaders in Boston called Williams' ideas new and dangerous. So in 1636, he was banished. That means he was kicked out or forced to leave the colony. He started a new settlement that he called Providence. Settlers in Providence were free to practice their religion their own way, and this was the start of what would become the colony of Rhode Island. So, guys, Providence, it's really important that you know what the word Providence means. It means a gift from God. Okay? Anne Hutchinson, another person we talked about on our videos, was also forced to leave Massachusetts. She offended Puritan leaders by speaking out on religious matters and insisting that faith in God was more important than church rules. So in 1638, she went to Rhode Island. Thomas Hooker, a Puritan minister, wanted more political freedom. He felt all men should be allowed to vote. Look out. They didn't trust everyone. They wanted a man to have property. Okay? Not just church members or property owners. His ideas led him to leave Massachusetts in 1636 to start a colony that would become Connecticut. All right. How do we know this? Says, let's look down here at the bottom. It says, dissent in the Puritan colonies. Dissent was not allowed in the Puritan colonies. Got one idea. Thomas Hooker left Massachusetts to find more political freedom. Let's look at Roger Williams here. And let's talk about our buddy Anne Hutchinson here. Sorry, I'm left-handed, guys. Okay, so what did Roger think? Roger felt he believed in freedom of religion. You should worship the way you wanted to. All right? And the government could not force you to do that. All right? He was banished in 1636. He got the boot. All right, Anne Hutchinson, someone else. She said faith in God was more important than church rules. That didn't fly. Okay? And then here we have Thomas Hooker. Turn the page. The middle colonies. Now, guys, remember we talked about this when we were watching our videos. Said the middle colonies, they were kind of more relaxed. They were less uptight than the New England colonies. After its founding by the Dutch in the 1620s, New Netherland became a thriving trade center. The colony soon included settlement made by the Swedes in the New Jersey area in the 1630s. And in 1664, England sent a fleet to capture New Netherland. The colonists refused to fight, so Peter Stuyvesant surrendered to the English without firing a shot. Now, I've read some people didn't like Peter Stuyvesant. They say he's kind of a jerk, and other people said, yeah, hey, he was okay. But here's the thing. Nobody there said, yeah, we're not fighting the British. We're not dying. We can go from being Dutch to English pretty fast. So there we go. 16. It says the colonists refused to fight. Peter Stuyvesant surrendered to the English without firing a shot. And that was 1664. And by 1674, it said England was full control because the Dutch said, yeah, you know what, we'll try to get that back. But hey, it didn't work. England's king gave the colony to his brother, the Duke of York. The colony was named New York. This name was also given to the city that had been called New Amsterdam. The Duke of York gave some of his lands into New York to two friends. There were George Carteret and John Berkeley. The land they received would become the colony of New Jersey. The Duke of York, Carteret, and Berkeley were known as proprietors. A proprietor is someone who owns land or property. New York and New Jersey were called proprietary colonies. So, hey, it pays to have friends. All right, New York and New Jersey had a diverse population. That is, there were people there from many different countries and backgrounds. People in these colonies belonged to many different religious groups, which is huge. This remained true even as the colonies grew. People of different religions were also accepted in the colony of Pennsylvania. Right, and there's our buddy right there, our Quaker friend, William Penn. You've probably seen a picture like him on the oat box. Okay, the guy on the oat box is not William Penn, but he is a Quaker. That's why it's called Quaker Oats. This colony began in 1681. England's king gave the land for the colony to William Penn, who was a Quaker. Quakers were opposed to war and felt that people should pray their own way. So you can see why England would not want the Quakers there. And even today, guys, Quakers are considered pacifists. They do not believe in fighting. Penn believed strongly in protecting each person's rights, which is huge, or freedom, to practice his or her own religion. Penn also believed in the rights of Native Americans living on the land that he had been given. He promised to pay them a fair price for that. So see, guys, here finally we have someone sticking up for the Native Americans. Delaware was also one of the middle colonies. It was part of Pennsylvania until 1704, when it became a separate colony. It says, complete each label on the timeline with facts about the founding of the four middle colonies. The English take over New Netherland from the Dutch. And what do they call it, guys? Go back there. Grab my pen from Alex. They call it New York. Okay. 1664, the Duke of York gives part of his new colony to his friends, who were Carteret. I hope I spelled this correctly. Going to go back and look at the book. And Berkeley. And that became New Jersey. All right, 1681. England gives land to William Penn. And I'm not sure, guys. I think if I remember this correctly, it was to pay off a gambling debt that he owed his father. All right, and he was a Quaker. We don't really refer, guys, to Quakers as much anymore. When we talk about Quakers today, if you go past one of their churches, they are known as the Society of Friends. Okay. In 1704, Delaware is formed from Pennsylvania. So they just kind of shave off a part of Pennsylvania, make it Delaware. So now we've got that done. In the South, the Virginia Company controlled Virginia at first. Then in 1624, King James decided to take over the colony. I think this is kind of interesting, guys, because remember when it was starving and there were people maybe going out to the graveyards and eating dead people and nobody was making any money? He didn't want anything to do with it. And all of a sudden now, hey, man, it's making cash. Boom, he wants it. Doesn't seem right. He appointed a governor under his control to run Virginia, becoming a royal colony. Okay, so now we've got two colonies, two types of colonies. We've got a proprietary colony where it's owned by someone else, and now we have a royal colony. Under the king's rule, it did not really change Virginia much. Self-rule continued. The governing body, the House of Burgesses, continued to meet. One big change did occur in 1632. Charles I, England's new king, gave part of Virginia to Lord Baltimore, one of his followers. This new proprietary colony was named Maryland. Lord Baltimore belonged to the Catholic Church. Maryland welcomed Catholics who were not always accepted in other colonies. So here we got 1632, part of Virginia goes to Lord Baltimore. We call it Maryland. Lord Baltimore was Catholic, and because of that, Maryland welcomed Catholics. Carolina also began as a proprietary colony. In 1663, King Charles II granted this land to 8 of his supporters. So see, the kings were really good about handing over land to people that kind of backed them. The colony was split in 1729 into North and South Carolina. The Carolinas had good soil for farming. In South Carolina, plantations grew valuable crops, especially as rice. Guys, this is an interesting thing about rice over here. Slaves taught plantation owners how to grow rice. All right, and here it says they relied on enslaved workers to farm and do their work. See, that was it. In New England, the farms were so small they did not have the need to use slaves on that. But for a plantation to work, guys, the whole economy of a plantation was based on enslaved workers. Charleston, an important Carolina city with a fine harbor, became a leading trading center. Okay, Georgia was founded in 1732. King George II let James Oglethorpe start a colony there for English people who were jailed for debt. Oglethorpe was welcomed by Tomochichi, chief of the Yamacraws. Georgia became known for its good relations with Native Americans. It also served a key military role, standing between Spain's Floridan colony and the other English colonies. Okay, I'm going to give you a little side note on this. So you guys have all been in cars or trucks. You know what a bumper's like. Okay, right down here, guys, we have Spanish colony. That's what we know now today as Florida. Okay, Georgia was like a bumper. So here we have the Spanish that the English didn't like. And the English thought, you know what? If ever something gets started up down there, where are they going to go? Well, they're going to attack north. They never really did. So who are we going to put there? Well, James Oglethorpe, you got all these debtors who the king didn't really want to feed or house in prison. Put them over there and thought, yeah, you know what? They go, the Spanish come up and hit. They're going to hit our bumper first. And by the time they go up there, hopefully we'll have the other colonies organized to come down here and fight back the Spanish. So I don't think the king was too worried about what was going on in Georgia. Okay, and over here it says, draw a line to match the detail to the right column with the colony it describes. It says Virginia. Okay, we've got a proprietary colony that welcomed Catholics. Colonists had good relations there with Native Americans. It became a royal colony when King James I took it over. Go back right back over here. It talks about King James I. We see the Virginia Company. So this is going to go here. See, guys, I went back to the text. I didn't get sick. Of course, I can't connect my lines. I didn't pass out. I didn't vomit. If you go back to the text and look for the answer, you will survive. Maryland. Okay, here we got Maryland right there. I'll highlight it. Oh, there's the Catholic Church. Oh my gosh, look what's happened when you go back to the text. You can find the answers. It was a proprietary colony that welcomed Catholics. North and South Carolina. All right, there's North and South Carolina. Rice plantations. I highlighted it. Okay, and it goes right there. And then there's Georgia. So, guys, that is it. That is lesson one. Hope you refer to this, and please feel free to go back over it. You really, guys, you've got this book. Take notes in it, mark it up. Use the book the way it was intended to use. I guarantee you, if Mr. Schuyler were to come by and see you, with your book like this, looking like this, he would be impressed. Hey, let's go ahead and do this over here. Number 5, it says enslaved people did much of the work on plantations, such as this one in Maryland. Write a task that a worker might have done in the kitchen, the house, or the barn of this plantation. Well, guys, think about barn. You've got animals to feed, to take care of. You've got to clean the barn. You can put up hay to feed the animals. In the kitchen, they're going to cook the food, serve the food. In a planter's house, they're going to be like maids and clean up. They could be butlers, and that's kind of like a male form of a maid. A house servant, even a house slave, even though they were still a slave, their life might have been a lot different, or maybe a little better than someone who had to work in the barns, or especially someone who had to work in the tobacco or the rice fields. But you got to remember, guys, no matter what job they did, whether it was an easy job or a hard job, they were still slaves, and they did not choose to be slaves.